KUNC and the NPR network. This is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. A unique legal argument caught our attention recently here at In The NoCo. It's about rules banning people experiencing homelessness from sleeping in public places in Boulder. This recent court filing by the ACLU of Colorado argues that camping is so fundamental to the culture and history of Colorado that cities should not be allowed to punish people who camp in public. The ACLU of Colorado filed that brief to fight a recent ruling that said the city of Boulder can ticket or arrest people for sleeping outdoors. So-called camping bans, like the one in Boulder, are used by cities across the country, and they've been upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. So how did the ACLU of Colorado decide to build an argument around the state's camping culture? And how likely is it to win? We asked the legal director for the ACLU of Colorado, Tim McDonald, to talk about why the group wants to end camping bans.
Well, what we know is that when we interpret the Colorado Constitution, we should do it from a Western lens. And we know dating back to Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute people, from Lewis and Clark to Zebulon Pike, Colorado has a long, rich tradition of people sleeping outside, covering themselves with blankets or buffalo hides, and sleeping in tents. And that's important for our courts to understand and recognize when we consider the long, rich tradition in Colorado of sleeping outside, a necessity for people who can't afford the exorbitant price of housing these days in much of our state.
And is that part of the reason this case is being brought into state court rather than federal?
Yeah, that's right. The Colorado Constitution prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, among other things, and that's what we're talking about here. It's cruel and unusual to criminalize people who have to sleep outside and need to cover themselves with a blanket or a tent so they don't die, frankly, outside.
Well, cities do build shelters to provide temporary housing, and Boulder has 2 of them. Why then shouldn't someone be ticketed if they're not using a shelter that's available to them?
Well, what we know in Boulder is that first, they don't have near enough shelter space. They have not invested enough in shelters for folks who are experiencing homelessness. And lots of people are turned away from shelters, including on nights when it's below freezing. And so this lawsuit targets folks who are criminally charged when they don't have any place else to go.
Part of Boulder's argument for the camping ban is that they have a duty to keep the public safe and that illegal activity in homeless encampments puts the public in danger. Tim, what is your take on that?
Well, if people are engaged in illegal activity, the city of Boulder can take necessary action to protect public health and safety. What they can't do, what they shouldn't do, is criminalize the act, the status of people who cover themselves with a blanket when they're forced to sleep outside.
So you're really talking about separating the act of camping from illegal trash dumping, for example, or, public defecation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are existing health and safety ordinances and regulations that the city of Boulder and other cities can use. What they shouldn't do is criminalize people who are unhoused. And we know that's what they have done. They're not actually targeting recreational camping or someone who falls asleep during a picnic. They're targeting poverty, and that's what we object to.
The ACLU of Colorado filing included a photo of a teachers' encampment at Chautauqua Park in Boulder from 1899. But a community of teachers being paid to do a job seems like a different situation than the homeless encampments that we might see along Boulder Creek. Why do you think the comparison is a good one?
Well, the question is there a long, rich tradition of people sleeping outside in Colorado? We included the picture of the tent encampment in Chautauqua because that's just one of the early examples that people came to Colorado, they slept outside, they covered themselves as necessary to survive the harsh elements. That was true in the 1700s, it was true in the 1800s, it was true in the 1900s, and it's true today. And so we think that sort of unbroken tradition of folks sleeping outside in Colorado needs to inform the analysis of what it means in Colorado. How do we interpret the Constitution? And can cities criminalize the status of people being unhoused?
As you mentioned, the Colorado Constitution prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. But the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a similar camping ban in Oregon did not violate the Eighth Amendment, which also prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Why is Colorado different?
We think that it's important to look at it from a Western lens. And those judges who sit and live in Washington, D.C., really have no conception of what it's like to live and, frankly, sleep in the elements in Colorado. That's why we think Colorado's tradition and history was so important to point out in our brief in this case.
Well, at the moment, Boulder District Court has upheld the city's camping ban. The U.S. Supreme Court, as we mentioned, has upheld a similar ban in Oregon. How confident are you that the Colorado Court of Appeals is open to your argument?
Well, we think we're right. We think it's important to look at this from a Western lens and not to criminalize the people experiencing homelessness. We know as a matter of public policy that it doesn't work. You're not going to improve people's lives by jailing them for sleeping outside. What you're going to do is maybe at best move people around, exacerbate the problem. So it's both bad public policy and it's wrong on the law as it applies to the Colorado Constitution.
Tim McDonald is the legal director for the ACLU of Colorado. He says a victory against Boulder's camping ban would end other camping bans throughout Colorado and could lead other Western states to strike down their own camping bans. We'll have a link to the ACLU of Colorado legal brief in the show notes and at KUNC.org. We want to take a moment and acknowledge the shocking attack that happened Sunday in Boulder. It targeted a group of participants in a walk to raise awareness about Israeli hostages being held in Gaza. KUNC News and the In The NoCo team are working on continued coverage in the days ahead. You can find those stories at KUNC.org and also on air wherever you listen. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thank you so much for listening.